Nobody talks about this enough, but some of the people who changed the world the most were once described as distracted, difficult, unrealistic, or too much. They asked strange questions. They jumped between ideas. They saw patterns nobody else noticed. And because of that, they often felt different from everyone around them. But psychology has discovered something fascinating about minds like these. Some brains are not designed to think in straight lines. They are designed to expand, to connect, to imagine multiple possibilities at once. This is called divergent thinking. And if you've ever felt like your mind moves too fast, too deep, or too differently for the world around you, this video may explain why. Because divergent thinkers rarely experience reality the same way most people do. They get bored with simple answers. They overanalyze small details. They see hidden meanings where others see nothing. And sometimes, without realizing it, they spend years believing something is wrong with them, when in reality, their brain may simply be wired for a completely different style of thinking. So in this video, we're going to explore 10 psychological signs that you may have divergent thinking, and why people with this type of mind often feel misunderstood for most of their lives. Modern society rewards people who can follow clear system. School trains you to find the correct answer quickly. Workplaces reward efficiency and predictability. Social environments often favor people who think in familiar ways. But the human brain was never meant to think in only one direction. In the 1950s, psychologist J.P. Guilford introduced the idea of divergent thinking to explain why some people naturally generate many ideas instead of searching for one perfect solution. And interestingly, this type of thinking is not the same as IQ. A person can perform average on traditional intelligence tests and still possess an unusually creative and expansive mind. Because divergent thinking is less about memorizing information and more about making unexpected connections between ideas. Neuroscience also suggests that highly divergent thinkers often show stronger activity in the brain's default mode network. This network becomes active during imagination, daydreaming, reflection, and spontaneous thought. In other words, the moments people call distraction may actually be moments of deep internal creativity, and that changes the way we should think about intelligence entirely. Psychologists have found that people with divergent thinking often share surprisingly similar mental patterns. Not obvious patterns, subtle ones, the way they react to boredom, the way they process conversations, the way their minds wander during ordinary moments. Many of these signs are misunderstood because they don't always look productive from the outside. But internally, the brain is constantly exploring possibilities, generating ideas, and building connections. And if several of these signs feel deeply familiar to you, there's a good chance your mind naturally operates in a more divergent way than most people around you. So let's begin. Sign 1. You rarely stop at one answer. When most people hear a question, they instinctively search for the most practical solution. But your mind keeps going. You think of alternative explanations, different possibilities, unexpected outcomes. And sometimes this happens so fast that you struggle to explain your own thought process. This is one of the clearest signs of divergent thinking. Your brain is not trying to narrow ideas down immediately. It is trying to expand them first. Psychologists describe this as cognitive flexibility, the ability to shift perspectives quickly and generate multiple concepts from one starting point. This is why divergent thinkers often appear highly imaginative, but also mentally restless. Their minds are rarely still. Sign 2. You notice connections other people miss. You hear a conversation about business and suddenly think about biology. You watch human behavior and compare it to music, nature, or physics. To you, these connections feel obvious, but other people sometimes look confused when you explain them. Research on creative cognition shows that divergent thinkers are unusually skilled at remote association. Their brains connect ideas across completely unrelated domains. This happens because the brain filters information less rigidly. Instead of separating concepts into isolated categories, it allows them to interact freely, and that ability often leads to innovation. Many breakthroughs in science, art, and philosophy began with someone seeing a connection nobody else noticed. Sign 3. You often question things people accept automatically. You don't reject rules just to be rebellious. You simply want to understand why they exist. Why do people follow this tradition? Why is this considered normal? What happens if we approach it differently? These questions arise naturally in your mind, and sometimes they make other people uncomfortable, because most people are trained to operate inside existing systems. but divergent thinkers instinctively examine the system itself. This is connected to higher levels of curiosity and exploratory thinking within the prefrontal cortex. Your brain is constantly testing possibilities rather than accepting assumptions. And while that can make you seem difficult at times, it is also the foundation of original thinking. Sign 4. Your best ideas appear at random moments. In the shower, late at night, while staring out the window, during conversations unrelated to the problem itself. Your ideas rarely arrive on command. And strangely, they often appear when you stop trying to force them. Neuroscience explains this through the default mode network. When the brain relaxes and attention becomes less controlled, distant ideas begin interacting freely. This creates sudden insight. That's why many divergent thinkers feel more creative during periods of reflection than during intense concentration. The brain needs mental space to generate unexpected connections. But the next sign reveals something even more surprising. Sign 5. You think in images, stories, or metaphors. Some people think mainly through structured logic. You think through imagination. You explain emotions using metaphors. You visualize concepts internally. You turn abstract ideas into mental scenes. This is not irrational thinking. It is symbolic thinking. Even Albert Einstein described many of his early scientific insights as visual imagination before mathematical language. Divergent thinkers often process information through imagery because the brain naturally searches for broader meaning and emotional association. And sometimes, that makes your inner world feel far richer than your external one. Sign 6. You become bored very quickly, especially when something feels repetitive. You may lose focus in environments that lack novelty, challenge, or mental stimulation. Not because you are lazy, but because your brain craves complexity. Studies on dopamine sensitivity suggest that highly creative thinkers often require stronger novelty stimulation to remain engaged. The brain becomes energized by discovery. New ideas, new systems, new perspectives. Routine drains that energy. And this is why many divergent thinkers struggle in rigid environments that demand repetitive behavior for long periods of time. Sign 7. You sometimes feel overwhelmed by your own thoughts. Your mind rarely moves slowly. One idea triggers another. One question becomes 10 more. And occasionally, it feels impossible to turn your brain off completely. This happens because divergent thinking increases associative activity in the brain. Your thoughts branch outward continuously. While this can create creativity, it can also create mental overload, especially in emotionally stressful periods. Many divergent thinkers experience overthinking not because they are weak, but because their brains naturally generate more possibilities than average. And if not managed carefully, that mental intensity can become exhausting. But the next sign may explain why you've felt misunderstood for so long. Sign 8. You are comfortable with uncertainty. Most people want quick closure. Clear answers feel safe. But you often feel comfortable sitting inside unanswered questions. You can explore multiple interpretations without rushing towards certainty. Psychologists call this tolerance for ambiguity, and it is considered one of the strongest traits linked to creative thinking. Because true creativity requires uncertainty. You cannot discover new ideas if you panic every time the outcome is unclear. Divergent thinkers are often drawn toward mystery, complexity, and open-ended exploration because ambiguity feels mentally stimulating rather than threatening. Sign 9 people have misunderstood you as unfocused. This may be one of the most painful signs. Especially growing up, teachers may have thought you were distracted. Other people may have assumed you lacked discipline. But internally, your mind was rarely empty. It was overloaded. Educational systems are largely designed around convergent thinking. One answer, one method, one expected outcome. Divergent minds do not naturally function that way. They explore sideways. They question constantly. They shift perspectives rapidly. And because of that, many divergent thinkers spend years believing they are broken, when in reality, their cognitive style simply does not match traditional systems. Sign 10. You are drawn to problems without clear answers. You enjoy exploring ideas that feel complex and unfinished. Questions about human behavior, existence, creativity, meaning. While others become frustrated by uncertainty, you become curious, because your brain enjoys possibility itself. This is why divergent thinkers are often drawn toward art, psychology, entrepreneurship, philosophy, innovation, and creative problem solving, not because they always know the answers, but because they are fascinated by exploration. The unknown feels alive to them. One of the biggest misconceptions about divergent thinking is that it only matters in creative careers. But in reality, this cognitive style affects how people experience life itself. Divergent thinkers often feel emotionally different from those around them because their brains continuously process hidden possibilities beneath ordinary situations. Modern society values speed, certainty, and efficiency, but divergent minds prioritize depth, exploration, and meaning. And that mismatch can create loneliness, especially when people around you misunderstand your curiosity as confusion or your imagination as impracticality. But historically, many major breakthroughs came from minds willing to think differently long before society understood them. From a psychological perspective, divergent thinking is not a flaw that needs to be fixed. It is a cognitive pattern that requires understanding and balance. The same brain that generates creativity can also generate anxiety. The same imagination that produces innovation can also create overthinking. This is why self-awareness matters. Healthy divergent thinkers learn how to organize their ideas without suppressing them. They learn how to rest their nervous systems while still protecting their curiosity. Because the goal is not to become normal. The goal is to understand how your mind naturally works and build a life that supports it instead of fighting against it. If many of these signs felt deeply familiar, there may be a reason for that. Maybe your mind was never meant to move in straight lines. Maybe the things you criticized yourself for, overthinking, questioning, daydreaming, feeling mentally restless, are actually connected to a different way of experiencing the world. Divergent thinking does not automatically make someone a genius, but it does mean the brain approaches reality through expansion rather than limitation. And once you understand that, you stop seeing yourself as broken. You start seeing yourself more clearly. How many of these signs felt familiar to you? And which sign described your mind the most accurately? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, because sometimes the most important thing a person can realize is that being different does not mean something is wrong with them.